On election day, the national headquarters of INEC in Abuja will monitor the elections throughout Osun State. Our Zoom situation room will be activated. We are working to ensure that accredited observers and the media are invited to join us at intervals to provide live reports from the field. At the same time, citizens can contact us on our various platforms, such as the toll-free INEC Citizens Contact Center telephone line, in addition to our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram accounts. I cannot conclude my remarks without addressing a matter of serious concern to our elections. Here, I'm referring to sundry violations of our electoral law, including the diabolical practice of vote buying, in which voters are financially induced to vote one way or another. It is obvious that the more the Commission and other stakeholders work hard to progressively improve the quality of national elections in Nigeria, the more some retrogressive elements undermine the process. While we continue to work with the security and anti-corruption agencies to confront this challenge, our effort will be given a boost by the establishment of the Electoral Offenses Commission and Tribunal.
There have been persistent warning over my life in the last 2 months. Very, very persistent. Very, very persistent. And in fact, it got to a stage that I became scared. But because I just believe life, we have to live it. But the warning has been coming from different angles persistently in the last 2 months. And again, in about 2.5 months ago, one of these thugs from Ilobu, my hometown, Said Itamfiani, actually physically crossed my vehicle while I was driving home. In fact, I was the only person who drove that day without any police escort. He crossed my vehicle, and I came there and said, "Young man, what do you think you are doing?" He said, "I should shut up. Who do you think I am?" He insulted me. And in fact, he was actually pushing my chest and I consider that thing a very terrible thing. Because this young man that I'm talking about, his own father cannot even do what he did to me that night. And a follow-up to that, while the warnings I've been receiving from different angles on an attempt that was likely to be made on my life.
Welcome back. Well, yes, as you've seen there, Reverend Father Atta Barkindo joins us now. He is the head of Secretariat for the National Peace Committee. He is also the Executive Director of Kuka Center. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program today.
Good morning, Chamberlain. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Now, while INEC putting or crossing their eyes and calling the T's and dotting the I's. Sometimes that always flips in my head, but it comes out differently. But you know, there are also security concerns, and not just for the Labour Party candidate, but there are others who are also reported to have been threatened, houses set ablaze, and so these kind of things are the kind of matters I reckon that your committee likes to see relegated to the background. But those concerns are still making the rounds. And perhaps, you know, you could give us a little bit of historical perspective, if you will. So give us your impression now, the job of the Peace Committee. How would you situate it in the circumstance?
Thank you so much, Chamberlain. I think what people have seen so far is just the event of the signing of the peace accord between contestants and the different political parties involved in the process. But actually what happens is that even ahead of the signing, there are all kinds of mediations, back channel, private phone calls and meetings and mobilizations that we carry out. And we share with all the political parties, especially the party chairmen and the particular candidates who are contesting, the content of the accord itself and the implications of the violations. So we carry out all kinds of mobilizations, and it is because all the members of the Peace Committee, particularly General Salam, who is the chairman, and Bishop Kuka, who is the convener, are really very worried about the level of insecurity that we have seen, just as the candidate of the Labour Party, Mr. Yusuf Lassen, have just mentioned there. So we are really very worried, and what we simply want to do is to lend our own little support to facilitate and contribute, especially key stakeholders that ordinary people cannot easily have access to, so that the Peace Committee can use it about their own obligation.
All right, so clearly it's we're losing him. Just keeps, but we'll sort that out in a moment. And
responsibilities towards what we are doing here in Osun State.
Okay, we lost you for a bit there while you were talking, but just thinking about the entire thing, how you do what you do, one wonders, given what we've seen of politicians in this climb, how many think that quite a number of them don't seem to put their money where their mouth is. Put simply, they're not honorable gentlemen as they're expected to be. But the Peace Committee, does you deal with them hoping that they comply or adhere to whatever agreements that they've signed? Because it's not as straightforward, perhaps, as it appears, as though if they go ahead and sign this Peace Committee, they will adhere to it to the extent that they will instruct all their adherents to make sure that they do not do anything to jeopardize what they've signed. So what impression do you get when you get them all together to sign that? So even though they appear as though, yes, they've done this, do you still get the sense behind the scenes that they are really and truly committed to ensure that all is well and ends well?
I think that they are truly committed. We have seen that, especially after the elections in Kogi State and the violence that we saw. The Peace Committee was very active in Edo State and even in Anambra State. And the Peace Committee was transition in Edo and in real-time commitment from not just the who are contesting the elections. The difficulty is that these individual candidates who are contesting these elections may not have absolute and complete control, over their followers. In some cases, yes. In other cases, probably not. And so that is why we constantly remind them. I mean, the members of the Peace Committee can easily fold their arms and go home and just sit and relax. But I think that they feel they owe this country a duty and a responsibility to come out and to lend their own support to that process. So what we have seen is total commitment at least. And normally there are some staff of the Peace Committee Secretariat whose job is to monitor violations and compliance with the accord. Okay. So even after the signing, these members of staff remain behind in this particular state. So in this case, they will remain behind in Osun to monitor compliance with the spirit and letter of the accord. And so if there are violations, either through speeches during political rallies, either through incitement, either through opinion pieces, or news conferences by a member of the political party, by the chairman or the particular candidate, that is quickly flagged off and reported to the members of the Peace Committee. But also beyond that, we are working to see where the peace accord that has been signed can actually serve as evidence in the court of law. during judicial, processes, especially when there's a bit of judicial contestation regarding the results of the elections. And that's why the Peace Committee is working very closely with INEC so that accountability mechanisms can now be undertaken by INEC using the laws, of the commission.
Quite a number of things play out there when you say the Peace Committee, they stay back and monitor and flag violations where they find them. So, wait, how does this work? If they were to monitor, because you know that sometimes, if not in many cases, if you have to go beyond what you see. So if one person accuses party A, party B could deny it. So how does Peace Committee come to conclusions that these violations emanated from these quarters? And how is it acted upon if you've ever faced that kind of scenario?
Chamberlain, the content of the peace accord itself is really within the real-time crimes. This is like beyond the mandate, so it is handed over to INEC and to the security agencies, because the Peace Committee itself does not have a security personnel somewhere that you are going to arrest people. No, that is way beyond our mandate. So if you look at the content of the peace accord itself, that has to do with compliance, ensuring that there's no incitement, that women are not abused, that you discourage and mitigate fake news, and that the media is objective, and all those issues. And so far from Kogi State, except Kogi State, what we have seen so far, especially Anambra, in Ekiti, in Ondo, in Edo, there has been no very serious and substantial violations that is within the mandate of the Peace Committee itself. So all other violations, we do our report, we hand them over to INEC, we hand them over to the security agencies. So
the ones that you handed over, has there been any action taken against any one of them?
I think that there are two things happening here. Number one, once we are done with those reports and we hand them over to the Peace Committee, there are certain levels of meetings and mediations within the mandate of the Peace Committee that the members themselves can actually carry out. But then, as for serious crimes that we have handed over the report, I think that, to be very honest with you, it has been a very serious challenge. As we hear the Commission's chairman, Professor Mahmoud Yakub, just mentioned there, setting up the Electoral Offences Commission, a tribunal that will support with trying some of these offenses. And I think commission, but also for Nigeria. So for example, what we saw in Ekiti, the massive vote buying, we were all really, it was very despicable. It was appalling, to see that kind of thing happening. And so we hope that going forward, the tribunal can come up and something serious will happen, because this is way beyond the mandate of the Peace Committee. The Peace Committee is just to carry out mediations, to talk and carry out some kind of moral intervention that will support the entire process. And in these serious things, we hand them over. And so we hope that the authorities will do something really practical and serious.
So to that extent, then, what can we say is really or are the implications or repercussions of violating the peace accord? I mean, just how much bite does it have? If there's not been much success in maybe prosecution or ensuring some sort of accountability, repercussions for violations, how much bite then can we say this has?
I think that the peace accord, in our opinion, has two advantages. Number one, beyond the compliance, serious compliance that people are looking out for, in cases where you have serious tension and anxiety and even lack of engagement between political parties, between political candidates, practically and physically seeing these people coming together to sit and to agree on something, I think in a way, even emotionally, sentimentally, it helps to douse, the anxiety, the tension. And we saw that happen especially in 2015, when there was so much tension in this country and President Buhari himself came to the table and signed this accord with former President Goodluck Jonathan. And even the optics, seeing them embrace each other, that was really something, because people were already predicting that the country was entirely going to disintegrate. So this is the first advantage, because during the campaign period, you find a situation where these political parties hardly talk to each other. Some of the candidates don't even have a handshake with each other. So this is a massive, massive advantage. As for the lack of compliance, we have not seen it, with the peace accord itself in a very big way, other than the normal crimes that the constituted authorities should have handled. And I think for me, we will leave that to the constituted authorities. The peace committee here is to provide moral intervention. And I think it is important to make that point.
Absolutely. And I think, to be fair, that has, it has had its effect, huge effect on the process and, the peaceful conduct of elections we've seen in recent times. In fact, the signing of the peace accord has become some sort of unofficial part of the build-up to elections. It's one of the things you look forward to once you see the peace accord. Oh, that election season, or at least the election itself, is upon us. But I noticed that for this one, there's a focus on, voter inducement, corrupt financial voter inducement. I recall the chairman of a committee, General Absalam Abubakar, speaking particularly about that. So is there anything in this peace accord that is meant to be signed just hours from now that touches on that maybe seeks to get their commitment regarding corrupt financial voter inducement?
So within the context of the accord itself, we have included a clause, a very serious clause in that. But beyond that, throughout last week and yesterday, members, not just members of the peace committee, but even the secretariat staff, we have been holding town hall meetings, appearing on FM radio, appearing on TV, local TVs here in Osun, talking to people, asking them, not to sell their votes and all that. But as Bishop Kuka would say, these are just, the symptoms. If people are really very dispossessed and there's aggressive poverty on ground, 3,000 naira may mean nothing to you, Chris. But to a family, that can keep them for a whole 1 week. The 3,000 naira or 5,000 naira, they have never seen throughout the year. So we are just trying to deal with the symptoms. But I think the greater issues are very, very structural. And so we are appealing to the authorities. Because if there are millions of youths who are completely unemployed, families are living without food, people are completely dispossessed. I mean, waiting for the period to sell your vote, get 10,000 naira, get 20,000 naira, is something like waiting for your own birthday. It's something like, and we can see the level of poverty on the streets. And so I think for me, the issues are very structural. It doesn't matter what we do, these structural issues must be dealt with.
I recall during the Ekiti election, which we covered, and there was a point where they were sharing money, and I actually approached some of them. Asking why. I recall a lady saying, "We're hungry here." And you could see the honesty, the pain in her voice. I was, at that point, my hands were tied. All I could just do was report that. And I'm wondering now, for this Osun elections, are you worried then that perhaps this might be another election where this will be pervasive? Because we saw it during the Ekiti elections, and it looked like nothing could be done. Security agencies looked the other way. In fact, some of them partook in it, I must say. And, officials their hands were tied, as they always say. So is that a concern you have, that in spite of all the, talking to people, getting them to sign even the peace accord that has a clause on voter inducement, that this might be pervasive?
It's not just in Osun State. If you look at generally, as we move towards the 2023 election, all the indicators, are there. The economy is in a very bad shape. The level of insecurity that you have seen. So I think that vote buying, as we saw in Ekiti, we are really very worried, not just about vote buying in Osun, but also, the level of insecurity, especially the attack on the candidate of the Labour Party. But also what has happened here in Osun State during the elections on Saturday could be a litmus test for what will likely happen during the 2023 general, elections. And for me, Chris, to be honest, all the indicators are there. Look at the economy. You people, during the newspaper analysis, you were just outlining the level of insecurity that we have seen, the kind of things that are happening, selection of candidates, what happened during the primaries. These are all indicators, and if we are not careful and steps are not taken beyond equity, beyond Oshun, even the general elections, could be consumed. I'm not trying to be a prophet of doom, but to be honest with you, all the indicators, are there, especially seeing how, dispossessed people are, the level of poverty, the economy and lack of employment. Millions of youths are at home because the universities are closed, ASU is on strike. And if general elections will offer people the opportunity to eke out some money, people will likely sell, their votes.
Speaking of indicators, Father, it would seem like it's a given already that it's a major factor that will shape the Osun election if, the words attributed to one of the candidates is anything to go by. He's been quoted as saying that he's ready to match naira for naira and even spend dollars in this election. And I wonder if security agents are taking a second look at this, if vote buying is a crime, is an electoral offense under the new Electoral Act. But perhaps we should rest on that and look at your earlier commentary. You said something about there are back channels, apart from the Peace Committee, there are back channels during which appeals are made, to some of these politicians. If we brought them, to a round table now and asked them if they were perpetrating electoral violence, they would say no. And we've had some of their representatives come to speak on the program. So I'd like to ask, I wonder if during those back channels, there's anything that gives off, that suggests grievances that could perhaps serve as pointers to the fact that indeed you're able to tell that these are the politicians perpetrating electoral violence.
So what happens is that after our mobilizations and private engagements with the candidates, the chairman of IPAC for that particular state, we work closely with INEC. So for example, yesterday, INEC had what we call the stakeholder meeting with all the political parties and key stakeholders in Osun State. This exactly, and we collaborate with INEC on that. So they express all their grievances, their concerns regarding vote buying, insecurity, attack on particular political party or candidate, and all the threats that will likely affect, the performance of their own particular candidates or political parties. So during that stakeholder meetings, all these issues are addressed, concerns are expressed. And then we announced that the next day they'll be signing actually of the peace accord. And during the mobilization, we give each party, the party chairman and the candidate, the content so that they can read and understand the letter and the spirit of that accord. And if they have any concern, they actually raise that concern before the signing of the accord. And so far, no person, no party, no candidate has raised any concern, because I think that the content of the accord is in line with every element, every component of Nigeria's law and even the Electoral Act. And so they have all agreed to come today at 10 a.m. at the Atlantic Civil Center to sign, the accord. So far, this is where actually we are. But the electoral process is just beyond a particular political party, a particular candidate. It involves literally every citizen, for example, here in Osun State. So the conduct of everyone, the normal, ordinary citizens on the street, the security agencies, the political parties, INEC itself, everybody will have to contribute to the success of that, elections.
The Barkindo that, the committee's work, part of the committee's work is to monitor and flag violations. I wonder when your mandate is activated actually, at what point during the election, if we consider the attack on the Labour Party candidate, is that part of what you have monitored and flagged? What are your findings in that regard, if your work had begun prior to that time? And where is it going to lead us?
So normally we arrive a few days before the signing of the accord, and we document, some of the security concerns, and we just flag them up and hand them over either to security agencies, INEC itself. But of course, something like this kind of a brazen attack that you have seen on the candidate of the Labour Party, I think is very obvious. Even if the peace committee members don't take any notice of that, the security agencies themselves have seen it. INEC have seen it. The whole authority in Nigeria have seen it. Does the peace committee in that context have to do anything? I really don't think so. We just have to document that this thing have happened. I think that so far, for what we have seen right now, investigations, are ongoing, and we expect that arrests really should be made. But what the peace committee can do is to reach out to the candidate of the Labour Party, reassure him, because participating in these elections and giving the people of Osun an option, an other array of options, I think it will be very, very important and very critical, because that is the beauty, of democracy. And so we will encourage him not to run away, not to step away. It is his right to participate, vote, and be voted for. And so these kind of threats may always be there, but I think that we have to confront them in order to deepen democracy, not just in Osun State, but I think in Nigeria generally.
Well, the Peace Committee has now been carrying out this mandate since the 2015 general elections. And a lot of people credited it for, perhaps a peaceful transition we witnessed in 2015. From then on, would you be able to say that you've been able to record concretes in terms of your interventions, not just at general elections, but also at off-season elections like this?
The mandate of actually the Peace Committee in 2015 was supposed to have been one-off because of the tension that existed, especially between when that event was done and the signing and everything happened and there was a peaceful transition. I know from the report that there was a specific request for the Peace Committee to remain, to specifically provide those moral interventions, because the members have so much convening power. They are able to have access to the highest, level of policymakers in government to a way that certain organizations, certain people may not have. And I think since then, that is what the Peace Committee has been able to provide. Number one, having access, to people at the highest level of government, trying to present the concerns of ordinary people and other things that have been happening to the government, whether they listen or they don't listen, but they are able to bring those to the attention. And I think that because of the seriousness of that and the moral intervention they were able to provide, that was when the demand came that they should also help, during the off-cycle elections. I remember the tension in Anambra State, even when Dora Akunyili's husband was assassinated. Literally, people were not even talking Anambra State. People were afraid whether the elections in Anambra State was going to happen or not. I was in Anambra State for over 2 months on behalf of the members of the Peace Committee and with the mandate of General Salam, the chairman, and the convener, Bishop Kuka. I met with literally every governorship candidate, begging them to come to the table and agree to a peace agreement so that the elections in Anambra State will happen peacefully. And to be honest, people thought the event was not going to happen. There was no way the governorship candidates in Anambra State will come together because of the tension. IPOP as other people to sit at home. The election was not going to happen, just like they predicted the complete disintegration of Nigeria in 2015. But to the surprise of everyone, the candidates came together, signed the accord. The elections in Anambra State took place peacefully. Announcement was made. Soludo became the governor of the state. And life went, moved on. We did the same thing in Edo. I remember the tension in Edo to a point that we had to involve the Oba, of the Oba not the Oba, the local traditional ruler in Edo State. So we were able to pull everyone together, and the signing of the accord happened in Edo State, and then everything simply moved, forward. And I think that those moral interventions are literally needed. For the reason that there's a lot of trust deficit in state-owned institutions, in institutions mandated by the Constitution. A lot of people don't trust the process. And that is why people may turn either to religious leaders, to traditional rulers, to some moral kinds of organizations that will provide support and intervention. And I think on that note,
while people are hoping, as well as you are, that there will be a moral growth, a moral culture seeping into our politics, do you think that morality will be enough? I know you've spoken about, collaborating with INEC. INEC is seeking laws to be made to actually hold people accountable. Considering the fact that you have no other powers apart from holding people morally accountable, do you think that it will be sufficient enough to actually hold politicians in check, considering how desperate people can become during elections?
I'll be very honest with you, is actually challenging, but it can be consolidated if there is true compliance with the Electoral Act and with laws, and that people are held accountable by authorities that have been mandated by law to hold people, accountable. So morality on its own does not survive. Morality survives when there is elimination of the culture of impunity, and when there is accountability mechanism in place. That is when you know that morality is working. But unfortunately, as you can see in our own country, that has actually, collapsed to a point that if there are no accountability mechanisms in place, should we also fold our hands and do nothing? And then the entire thing goes down the drain. And I think that we are hoping, and not just praying, but actively hoping and actively working and reminding key stakeholders that it is important to comply, even beyond just morality.
And Reverend Father Atta Barkindo, Head of Secretariat National Peace Committee and also Executive Director of Kuka Center, thank you very much indeed for your time, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you, Chamberlain.
We're back in a moment, everyone. Stay with us.